My name is Michael Johnson. At 38, I'm an architect in Denver, Colorado, a man who finds solace in blueprints and the predictable physics of load-bearing walls. I built my life from the ground up with nothing but my own ambition as the foundation. There's a profound satisfaction in creating order from chaos, in knowing every line and every angle has a purpose. My life was a testament to that principle, stable, orderly, and precisely how I wanted it. That precious sense of control shattered one Thursday afternoon. I was in the middle of a tense client presentation, walking a development group through the intricate blueprints for a new downtown high-rise. The air in the conference room was thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the weight of a multi-million-dollar decision. This was my element. Then my phone, set to silent, vibrated insistently on the polished mahogany table. One buzz is a notification, 3 in a row is a demand. The insistent buzzing snapped me out of my world of steel and glass and dragged me back into the messy reality I'd spent years escaping. A quick glance revealed a string of texts from my sister, Chloe. The last one glowed on the screen, a beacon of casual entitlement. Send me $4,500 for my graduation trip. I froze mid-sentence, the words about structural integrity catching in my throat. The clients looked at me, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and impatience. $4,500 for a week of tequila shots and beach selfies in Cancun with her sorority sisters. I felt a familiar, hot tightening in my jaw, a surge of volcanic anger that was becoming all too common. I forced a polite smile, excused myself, and stepped into the sterile quiet of the hallway. My thumbs, usually so steady with a drafting pen, trembled slightly as I typed a terse reply. Earn it yourself. Minutes later, just as I finished the meeting with a handshake and polite smile, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Chloe. It was a coordinated assault, a 1-2 punch from my parents. My mother's text came first, a masterpiece of emotional blackmail refined over decades. Pay for your sister's trip, or you are no longer part of this family. My father's followed a second later, a cold, brutal echo of her sentiment. Do the right thing, Michael. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a frantic, trapped bird. For years, I'd been sending money to their joint account, believing it was always for real emergencies, the unforeseen medical bills, the urgent home repairs, that just helping us get through the month, please. But this was a demand, an ultimatum stripped of all pretense. Fund my sister's luxury vacation or be cast out. The raw anger was still there, but it was now laced with something sharper, more painful. It was the gut-wrenching realization that their perception of me as a son had been reduced to that of a personal ATM, and that this cynical transaction had been going on for far longer than I had ever allowed myself to believe. After the clients left, the office felt unnaturally quiet. The city skyline outside my window, usually a source of pride, seemed to mock me with its serene indifference. My phone rang, Chloe's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, but she called back immediately. I finally answered, steeling myself. You are so unbelievably selfish, Michael, she began, her voice shrill, laced with a venomous entitlement that turned my stomach. It's my graduation trip. Why can't you just help me for once? I gripped the phone, the cool glass slick in my sweaty palm, and forced my voice to remain level. For once. Chloe, I've been helping Mom and Dad for years. You're 21 years old. Plenty of college kids work part-time to pay for their own trips. It's time you tried it. She scoffed, a sound of pure, unadulterated disdain. You just don't get it. I deserve this. My friends are all going. Before I could form a response to the sheer absurdity of her claim, she hung up. Deserve it. The word echoed in the silent office. I remembered being 19, desperately needing $300 for a crucial set of architectural drafting tools. I had begged my parents for a loan, promising to pay it back with interest from my next paycheck at the diner. My mother had just sighed, a sound of weary martyrdom. We just can't afford it right now, Michael. 2 weeks later, they bought Chloe a brand new, top-of-the-line bicycle for over $500 because she'd mentioned wanting to ride with her friends. That was when I learned. My needs were inconveniences, but Chloe's whims were sacred. My father once told me, in a rare moment of what he probably considered candor, Chloe is our second chance to get it right as parents. The comment stung, a casual dismissal of my entire upbringing. But I swallowed the hurt and kept moving forward, determined to succeed on my own. By midday, the family offensive escalated. I received a notification for a new voicemail. It was Chloe, but she clearly hadn't realized she was being recorded after I didn't pick up. Her voice was a conspiratorial whine. "Mom, Dad, Michael's being a total jerk about the trip money," she complained. "You guys need to call him and tell him to pay." A few minutes later, the text from my parents arrived, feeling less like messages and more like tactical strikes. My hands trembled as I read the words again and again. The right thing? I'd sent them tens of thousands of dollars. Now my place in the family was contingent on a $4,500 graduation trip. My chest tightened until it was hard to breathe. Something was fundamentally wrong, and the feeling was as solid and undeniable as the steel beams in the buildings I designed. Acting on a sudden, chilling impulse, I opened my banking app and began scrolling through years of transfers to the family account. Thousands upon thousands of dollars. 1,500 here, 900 there. Always accompanied by a vague promise that it was for absolute necessities. Late that afternoon, a different kind of message arrived, one that shifted my simmering anger into cold dread. It came while I was staring blankly at a blueprint, unable to focus. My email pinged with an automated alert from the bank that managed the joint family account. The subject line was stark: large transaction and overdraft warning. My heart sank as I clicked it open. A transfer for $7,500 had been attempted that morning, but because the funds were insufficient, the transaction had been declined and the account was now overdrawn. I stared at the screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. I hadn't authorized it. My mind immediately connected the dots. My refusal, their threats, and now this desperate, failed attempt to take the money anyway. This wasn't a coincidence. It was an act of blatant theft. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't work. I needed answers, and I knew with chilling certainty that my family would not provide them. That's when I thought of Olivia Chun. Olivia was a brilliant corporate lawyer whose firm rented the floor above mine. We'd become friends over countless shared elevator rides and late-night coffee runs, bonding over impossible deadlines and a shared love for brutalist architecture. I texted her, "Can we talk? It's about family, but I think I need legal help." She replied within a minute. "My office, 7 p.m. By 7 o'clock, I was sitting across from Olivia in her minimalist, impeccably organized office, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside her panoramic window. I laid out the whole sordid story, the demand, the ultimatum, and finally, the failed $7,500 transfer. "Something is deeply wrong with that account," I finished, the frustration evident in my voice. "I need to know exactly what they've been doing." Olivia listened intently, her expression calm but focused. She steepled her fingers. "Okay, Michael, let's pull the complete records," she said, turning to her laptop. Within moments, she had pulled up 5 years of statements, a digital trail I hadn't laid eyes on in years. "Oh, wow," she murmured, her brow furrowing. A cascade of transactions scrolled past, a litany of their indulgence paid for by my labor. "There are multiple, very large withdrawals here, month after month. Some are going to credit card companies, others to auto financing groups." I leaned forward, my stomach clenching into a tight, painful knot. "Credit cards? Auto financing? What are you talking about?" Olivia scrolled through the records, her expression growing more grim with each page. "High-end department stores, Michael. Payments to a Lexus financing plan. Charges from luxury resorts. Even a travel agency specializing in European tours." My mind reeled. This wasn't about a leaky roof or keeping the heat on. This was about funding a lifestyle. Olivia kept digging, her focus absolute. "It looks like your parents have been systematically using this account to pay down enormous personal debts," she said, her voice softening with empathy. "There are payments here for multiple credit cards, a luxury car loan, and, Michael, there's a second mortgage on their house." The numbers on the page seemed to blur, and a wave of nausea rose in my throat. A second mortgage. The word echoed in my mind. Every frantic call, every plea for a little help, wasn't for survival. It was for servicing a debt they had deliberately hidden from me. Then Olivia pointed to another series of transactions, smaller, but just as damning. "And these," she said quietly, Our consistent payments to boutiques, expensive restaurants, and a prom and formal event planner. A prom planner. Chloe's demand for trip money wasn't a one-off request. It was the culmination of a long-established pattern. They've been bankrolling her entire life with my money, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Olivia nodded slowly. Michael, your parents have been using your generosity to pay off their debts and to give your sister anything she wants. I leaned back in the chair, stunned into silence. For 5 years, I thought I was being a dutiful son. In reality, I had been the unwitting financier of their elaborate web of lies. I left Olivia's office that night with a cold, heavy certainty in my gut. My parents weren't just pressuring me for vacation money. They were hiding years of systematic deception, and I was about to find out just how deep the rot went. The drive home from Olivia's office was a blur. The city lights streaked past, but I saw nothing but the red figures on those bank statements. The betrayal was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't just about the money. It was the calculated deception, the years of carefully crafted lies. Every "we love you" now sounded like a setup for another withdrawal. The next day, I was back in Olivia's office. She had a thick stack of printed documents on her desk, bound with a clip. Her expression was grim. "These are the complete bank records," she said, pushing the stack toward me. "You're not going to like what you see." My stomach twisted as I began to read. The top page was a summary Olivia had prepared. Over the last 5 years, a total of $152,000 had been withdrawn from the joint family account. My money, siphoned away without a single word. The detailed log showed payments for the Lexus they never told me about, the secret second mortgage, and a $2,000 payment to a bespoke dressmaker for Chloe's high school prom. That was the moment I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, Saturday, I walked into my bank branch the moment it opened. I instructed the manager to immediately freeze and close the joint account. It only took 15 minutes, but each signature felt like breaking another link in a heavy chain I'd dragged for years. With the account officially defunct, I went home and drafted an email to my parents and my sister. I kept it brief, cold, and devoid of emotion. The joint account is closed. I have seen the statements for the last 5 years. I know about the $152,000. There will be no more money. Do not contact me. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my finger hovering over the send button. My hand was steady, but my chest felt heavy with a sense of loss. This was about so much more than money. It was about trust, and they had methodically shattered it. I hit send. Within an hour, my phone lit up like a bomb had gone off. Chloe called first, her voice a frantic, ugly mix of panic and rage. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "We need that account. Mom has bills to pay." "Need it for what, Chloe? More designer clothes? Another trip you haven't earned?" I asked calmly. She sputtered, unable to form a coherent sentence, before finally screaming, "You are tearing this family apart," and slamming down the phone. My mother's text arrived seconds later, a long, rambling wall of text filled with typos and accusations. "How dare you accuse us of anything? We needed that money to survive. You have no idea how hard things are for us. You are a cruel and ungrateful son. Survive? On European vacations and luxury cars?" The hypocrisy was staggering. My father's message was shorter but carried the same desperate, manipulative tone. "Michael, think about what you're doing to us. To your mother." I didn't reply to any of them. 1 week later, I flew to Boise. I drove my rental car to my parents' house, the same suburban home I had grown up in. On the seat beside me sat a thick manila folder stuffed with bank statements. Olivia's research had uncovered the full, catastrophic picture. They were nearly $700,000 in debt. I let myself in with my old key and found them in the living room. The air was thick with a palpable, suffocating tension. My mother was perched on the edge of the sofa, her arms crossed. My father stood by the fireplace, his posture rigid. My sister, Chloe, was curled in an armchair, furiously tapping at her phone. "I know everything," I said, my voice echoing in the quiet room. I dropped the folder onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. "You took over $150,000 from me. And on top of that, you are drowning in almost $750,000 of debt." I spread the documents across the table like a losing hand of cards. My mother's face crumpled, but not with remorse. It was pure indignation. "How could you do this?" she snapped, her voice trembling with rage. How could you dig into our private business? This is a family matter. Family? A family doesn't systematically steal from their own son. I shot back, my voice steady despite the hurricane of hurt inside me. You lied to me for years. You told me it was for survival, for keeping the house. Instead, you were funding her lifestyle. I gestured sharply at Chloe, who still refused to look up. My father finally moved, his tone accusatory. You don't understand the pressure we were under, Michael. The debts just piled up. You were successful. You were supposed to help us. I stared at him, dumbfounded. I did help. I sent thousands every year, without question. And you pissed it all away on things you couldn't afford to keep up this pathetic facade. My mother cut in, tears of self-pity streaming down her face. You're just so selfish. We did all of this for her, for your sister's future. I glanced at Chloe, waiting, hoping for some sign of shame, some flicker of an apology. She remained utterly silent, her face a blank canvas, content to let our parents fight her battle for her. That silence, that complete lack of accountability, cut deeper than all their shouting combined. My father's voice grew louder, more desperate. You can't just walk away from us, he said, his eyes blazing with a strange mix of anger and fear. We are your family. You owe us. Owe them. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of that statement burned in my throat. I don't owe you anything, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Suddenly, Chloe looked up from her phone, her eyes wide not with remorse, but with annoyance. Oh my God, she whined. So does this mean I can't go to Cancun? The room fell silent. That question, so breathtakingly selfish, was the final confirmation I needed. They were beyond saving because they couldn't even see they were drowning. I held their gazes, one by one. You abandoned me a long time ago, I said, the words tasting like ash. I calmly gathered the documents. I'm done. Their voices chased me onto the porch, a chaotic chorus of blame and desperation, but I never looked back. Back in Denver, I methodically dismantled the remaining connections. I blocked their numbers and email addresses. Months dissolved into a year of absolute silence, and in its place, I found a piece I hadn't realized I was missing. Word eventually reached me through a distant cousin. My parents had filed for bankruptcy. Their house was foreclosed on. They had lost everything. Chloe had been forced to drop out of her expensive university and was working 2 part-time jobs, one at a coffee shop, another in retail, to pay for classes at a community college. I started seeing a therapist to help me unpack the decades of emotional and financial manipulation to rebuild the sense of self-worth that my family had so carelessly eroded. It felt like demolishing a condemned building to rebuild from scratch. Painful, messy, but necessary. Looking back, this excruciating ordeal taught me a vital lesson. Setting those boundaries was the hardest and best thing I have ever done. Family isn't a blank check, and love should never come with a price tag. I spent years believing it was my duty to save them, to be their rock. I was wrong. Setting boundaries, taking control of my own life, and walking away from a toxic dynamic. That is what ultimately saved me. For the first time in years, I wasn't building something for them. I was finally building something for myself.